supply chains, profit incentives, and government regulations. Gah! Sounds like a blast. Why is housing so expensive? I probably don't need to prove that housing is bad now, but here are some numbers. Between 2010 and 2019, the average rent in the US increased by 36%, while the median income only rose by 27%. This effect was more pronounced in major cities. An average of 19 US cities had a rent increase of more than 58% during the 2010s, while median income increased only 39%. That disparity between income growth and rent means that a higher share of renters are cost-burdened, defined as when someone has to commit more than 30% of their income to housing costs. By the end of 2020, 46% of renters were cost-burdened, which meant they had less money to spend on other essentials like food, healthcare, transportation, and Blu-ray editions of Steven Spielberg Presents The Money Pit. Again, these numbers are even worse in big cities. In Los Angeles, an estimated 73% of renting households are cost-burdened, and 48% spend more than half of their total income on rent and utilities. And of course, Black and brown communities tend to be hit harder by housing costs than other races. Race, of course, being a fake thing we made up. We should really just have a standing asterisk across this entire episode. Whatever I'm talking about, it's safe to say that the situation is probably even worse for Black and brown people due to racism, a system of oppression based on a fake thing that we made up. You will notice that those numbers are from before the start of the pandemic, which of course exacerbated this problem. Even with all that wonderful stimulus that has so many of us living high on the hog, nearly half of American workers in 2021 didn't earn enough money to rent the median one-bedroom apartment. Half. And 14% of renters fell behind on rent payments during the pandemic, double the pre-pandemic rate. Double. This is likely a contributing factor to why, in the first year of COVID, the number of people moving increased. Many of these people were out of work and could no longer afford rent, and thus moved in with their parents or other family, or looked for something cheaper. Others moved out of dense cities and into the suburbs, or to less populated states at higher rates than usual, either to look for something more affordable, or potentially because they were able to work from home. Maybe some of them were offered money in exchange for spending a night in a haunted house. We don't know for sure, but it's exciting to think about. Regardless of the reason, this temporary increase in movement pushed rents and home prices even higher. But at least, you might say, at least people were protected from eviction during the pandemic because of the federal eviction moratorium. You might say that because you forgot that this country values the rights of landlords more than the rights of people who'd rather not sleep in the rain. It happens. I forget stuff myself sometimes. That's why I'm covered in reminder tattoos. Brush teeth. Eat teeth. Etc. Just as a refresher though, the Supreme Court struck down the CDC's moratorium on evictions in 2021, and landlords were still finding ways to evict people anyway, often by citing a non-COVID related reason for doing so. And remember the asterisk. Black and brown families were the most likely Americans to be evicted. So yeah, it's bad out there. Unless you're literally stuck in the floor, it's incredibly difficult to get real housing stability. So hey, G's and crackers now. What the happened? Why were your parents or grandparents able to buy a 4-bedroom house for a goat and a smile while you're out here shelling out $2,600 a month for the Harry Potter room under the stairs, owl shit and all? A major reason is one we've already mentioned, that home prices and rents have both grown at higher rates than income over the past 60 years, a trend which got worse in the first decade of this century. But another reason is that the US government used to actually help some prospective homebuyers. Some is a big word there. Let's start with the New Deal. Not the Green New Deal when socialists try to make us gay marry soy burgers, but the one before that. During the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt and Congress passed the National Housing Act of 1934, which created the Federal Housing Administration and provided insurance for the banking and mortgage industry. This was designed to slow down housing foreclosures and encourage new construction. In 1937, the government created the United States Housing Authority, which provided funds to bolster construction in low-income neighborhoods, resulting in hundreds of thousands of new units in which tenants were only expected to pay half the rent. Unfortunately, there was some uncomfortable language in there which contributed to some of the problems we still have today. And by uncomfortable language, I, of course, mean racism. Geez, it's always racism with this country. Heck, it's like Spectre in those Bond films. And that's where the some comes into play, you see. It's from this era that we get the process of redlining, whereby the Homeowners Loan Corporation gave color-coded grades to neighborhoods based on their risk for mortgage lenders. The public reasoning for this was to give the banks and other lenders an incentive to get on board, to tell them that expansion of homeownership wouldn't set them up for risky bets. Of course, the Federal Housing Administration just assumed, racistly, that places where black people lived or lived near would have lower property values and be risky bets. And those were exactly the neighborhoods which got the yellow definitely declining and red hazardous labels. This trend continued after World War II when the GI Bill pumped $95 billion into programs for returning veterans, but whose benefits, like housing and business loans, were routinely denied to black service members. The GI Bill, which President Bill Clinton called the best deal ever made by Uncle Sam, was actually deliberately designed to accommodate Jim Crow, according to political scientist Ira Katznelson. Also, sometimes, when black and brown people lived in desirable areas, the local governments there would simply kick them out. Like, literally just make them leave. This was the case with a piece of land called Section 14 in Palm Springs, California. From 1954 to 1966, when Palm Springs was emerging as a popular vacation destination, the city started mass evictions of black families. People would often come home at night to find their homes were gone, as in bulldozed or burnt to the ground. Can't stress it enough, they just fucking booted them out. So again, the word some is very important when talking about this era of housing. But for much of white America, New Deal programs were game changers, creating a level of housing affordability that allowed the suburbs to expand and white home ownership to surge. In 1947, President Truman signed legislation capping rents at $80 a month and new home prices at $10,000, which helped everyone, but it was rescinded a few months later. If only the strict cap had stayed in place and those other federal benefits were applied to everyone, and not just white people, this video might be a lot shorter, or heck, might even be about something else, like the Dilbert guy. That'd be fun, right? See, we're sorting through two issues here. One is a state-sponsored system of segregation that institutionalized the idea that proximity to people of color decreases property values, and the other is a very real solution to housing that sadly was only applied to white people. But obviously those two ideas are intertwined. It's very important to recognize how racist policies result in negative outcomes for the majority of people regardless of race. Not that white people should be anti-racist only if they are personally affected, for the love of God. There's a whole other video we could do about racist housing policies of old and the very real ripple effect they cause today, long after the practices were banned, because everything I've just said, the redlining, the temporary surge of home construction, the way we built and maintain our cities, sets the stage for the historic housing affordability crisis happening right now. And also, it goes without saying that the good, not racist parts of the New Deal are things we probably needed to continue doing. Stuff like pumping billions into veteran support and funding low-income neighborhoods. This is exactly why your grandparents could afford a house. But again, we should more specifically say your white grandparents, elder honkies, stale crackers, etc. But instead of making these advances less racist, we just got rid of them. And that's the problem. We excluded certain people from great benefits and then just got rid of the benefits for everyone instead of making them more inclusive. Because, of course we did. It's not surprising, but it's still disappointing. Like every time Kevin Sorbo is trending. Anyway, we're going to explore the simple, impossibly complex tangle of varying factors that are currently making renting and buying homes so expensive right now. Right now, meaning after these ads, which are happening right now.
Hi, Katie Stoll here. You know, as someone born and raised on a fishing trawler, I've come to realize that life is a lot like the ocean. They're both endlessly expansive, definitely